This is Gardening in America, and I'm Ed Hume. Today we're on the island of Maui in the Hawaiian Islands. We're at the Maui Tropical Plantation, and I'm with the agricultural manager, Rennie Platts. Where is the Tropical Plantation, Rennie?
It's in the central valley of Maui, and it's right up against the West Maui Mountains in a little town called Waikapu.
And what do you do here at the plantation?
The plantation is really a marriage between the two major industries in Hawaii, tourism and agriculture. We showcase tropical agriculture that you don't see on the mainland.
Tell me a little bit about some of the special crops. For example, the pineapples. How long does it take for them to reach maturity?
First crop takes almost 2 years from planting time until you get your first fruit. After that, it's 1 year in between.
So you get a second crop on the same
You can return
plant.
3 times.
Okay. And what about papayas?
Papayas will produce all year round. It's the fastest producing tree, sometimes within 9 months of seed, usually more like 12 months.
Oh, wow. And then what about starfruit?
Starfruit is a seed-grown, usually a grafted variety produce, and it produces twice a year.
And bananas?
Bananas produce all year round.
Oh, they do. Mm-hmm. And you have a whole bunch of different types of bananas, don't you?
We've got some ornamentals, we've got some reds, we've got apple bananas and some bluefields and some Williams hybrid.
Now, I noticed quite a few macadamia nut trees. How long until they produce?
It takes about 8 years before you start getting a viable crop with macadamia nuts.
You know, is what I like about the Maui Tropical Plantation Gardens is that you've got so much going on here that a person can come to one spot and see it all. You've got the gift shop. My gosh, that's just outstanding. You've got a plantation area, a little with some of the different shops in that area.
We've got little displays on a lot of the major crops, as well as our narrated tour that takes you through the whole plantation and tells you about all the major crops in tropical America.
And a restaurant here?
Great restaurant.
Yeah. You've got some monkeys and other creatures around?
Well, we've got creatures all over the place.
It's really outstanding. And above all, that would interest our viewers, I think, are your great selection of plants that surround us here in other parts of the garden as well.
Well, I majored in agriculture, and it's just a fun place to work. It's more like playing.
Yeah.
A little bit of everything here that you wouldn't get to do in normal farming.
Maui Tropical Plantation, and it's on the island of Maui. What a great place to visit because you can get all kinds of ideas, not only about the crops that grow here on the island, but also some of the beautiful flowers that grow in this region. And at the same time, there's all kinds of entertainment, whether it be a tour through the plantation gardens or whether you just sit down and have a cup of coffee or something to eat. Thanks very much, Rennie.
Aloha.
Today we have several plants of the week. One of them is the ground cover thyme. This low-growing plant is a great grass substitute in small areas. It's not one you walk on all the time, but occasionally. It's also a very attractive ground cover plant. It does well in rockeries, or plant them in amongst stepping stones or in the crevice between rockery stones. They do really well. And there are several different types. Some of them are red, some of them are white, pink, lavender. This one's woolly thyme, and it has kind of a gray foliage, which is very attractive, but seldom flowers. When it does, the flowers are white. A great grass substitute, though, or a low-growing ground cover. And here's another nice plant to use. This is the ajuga. Ajuga is a great ground cover with beautiful blue flowers on it, blue to lavender. It comes in several different varieties, and during the fall season it takes a bronze cast onto the leaves. It does best in full sun or partial sun and shade. Low-growing ground cover only grows about 6 inches high. And then, speaking of ground covers and really nice perennials, here's another one. This flowers in springtime. This is the creeping phlox. And it does best in full sun, flowers really well. To give it a little bit of a haircut or trimming after it finishes flowering is really beneficial. Keeps the plant nice and bushy like these two plants here. And at the same time, then it increases the number of flowers that you have the following year. And since we're talking about plants of interest, how about the winter flowering pansies? There are a whole bunch of different varieties of winter flowering pansies. Some of them have solid flowers, some are bicolor, and some are what we call faced flowers. In other words, they have the markings on the front of the flower. Really attractive plants. These flower anytime the weather's moderate throughout the winter. If you have a holly tree in your garden, why not share some of the cut greens with friends and relatives all across the country? Here's a holly bush, and actually several that I have here in my garden, and I cut some of the branches last night and I put them in water, warm water, not hot water, but warm water, so they'd soak up moisture overnight. In fact, you'll even notice I have a variegated leaf variety here. Now, the important thing to notice is that here's a branch that I cut last night that's diseased. Do not send that. You know, if you're going to use that at all, make certain that you cut off that very tip, the diseased part of the branch. And then maybe it'd be all right to send it because it's clean the rest of the way. Also, you might want to check on the undersides of the leaves to be sure that there are no spider webs in any way, so that you're not transporting anything into the house or sending along to someone else. Now, the important thing here is when you cut a branch is that I think it's best if each branch be about 12 to 18 inches in length. Oops, dropped that one. But that's what I have in mind, something about that length, and with the berries on it, all the better. This has already been treated, so I'll use it right away. Let me show you what I'm going to do and how I'm going to treat it. I'm going to take some wilt proof. Now, there are other similar products that you can use to treat evergreen boughs such as holly. And what this does is it holds the moisture in the leaves so that they'll remain green and less of a fire hazard throughout the holiday season. So let me take a branch that I have had in water overnight, and here's what we'll do. We'll just simply spray this on the foliage, on the back side and the front side, very quickly. And you'll notice, look what happens. It's turned white, hasn't it? And you'll begin to wonder right away, is this what you're going to end up, a residue on the foliage? Well, let me show you. Here's one that I treated last night, and you can see instead the foliage is glossier and that residue is gone completely. So this is really very beneficial. Now, this needs to dry before I put it in the box, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to put it in, and you'll notice that it fits the box. You'll also notice that I have lined this container with wax paper. That's the key really to shipping holly. Be sure, of course, that the holly is dry, then put it in. And the next thing I would do is to poke just a few holes in the side of the box. And then, of course, wrap the paper right over the top of it. And you can easily send, holly doesn't weigh very much, so it's not going to cost you a fortune to share it with your friends and relatives all across the United States. And what a beautiful plant, and what a great holiday green to use indoors or outdoors during the holiday season. This is a great time of the year to put together your own swag with greens from your garden. And here's what I've done. This took about 3 minutes, and I didn't have enough ribbon, but it gives you an idea. This is Douglas fir, and then I've used salal, and I just sprayed it with a little bit of red paint, and I took a piece of firethorn and used some glitter paint on it, put a bow on it, and there's your swag. Now, here are a few simple principles as how to put this together. But before I do that, let me tell you one thing. I went to the Nursery Garden Center and I got some greens, and they sell them at this time of the year. Cedar, juniper, and the juniper is very, very fragrant. Also, they had in the bunch, it was all in a bunch too, by the way, some Doug fir, and they also had this beautiful noble fir. And that was all together in one bunch. So if you live in an apartment or something and don't have greens, you can buy them at those locations. But here's how you get started. You take one branch, and this is from a Douglas fir in my garden, and you point it upwards, and take the other branch and point it downwards and overlap the two. That's really important. Now in this particular case, I'm going to add a little bit of color to this by using a little bit of the cedar as well. We'll just add a couple branches pointing downwards, and then we'll put a branch or two, if I have to. Yeah, here's another one, upwards. See, so that begins to fill it out better. Then in addition to that, I'm going to use a little bit of juniper, point one down here and one up here in this manner, and those are all overlapped, as you can see. Then I'll take a flexible wire, or you could use florist wires, maybe easier. I like to have it on a spool like this, because what you need to do is to be able to tie it off and yet at the same time have some pressure to pull the wire very, very tight. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm tying it off here in the back to begin. Now is what I'll do is to take this spool and run it over the top like so, and then pull tight, and then do it again once or twice, like so. Now I can cut that wire. Since I have a pruning shears, that's what I'll use, and I'll tie that off again. Now, we could take, and if you don't know how to make a bow, just buy one like I've done here, and put it on like so. And it's, fairly attractive for a door piece. You can also use, if you have pine in the garden, add other greens to it. Let's see, I better face it around the right way here and do exactly the same thing. So, a swag for the door during the holiday season is really nice. And it's very simple for you to do with greens from your own garden. And now's a good time to get started. Have you been out in the garden recently? There are all kinds of evergreen foliages that would be really nice for holiday decorating purposes. And I've gathered some together here. But first I have a piece of oasis, and I began covering it with moss. And all I do is take a piece of moss and then take a stick and to hold it in place like so. Very easy, isn't it? And we have a lot of salal in the garden, so we use that kind of as fillers. And you can see how easy it is. The oasis, of course, is moist. And usually I start by putting one in on each side and then fill from that point on. And these evergreen foliages are really very, very nice, very Christmassy in fact. There's the salal coming in very nicely into this combination here. And now, let's also add some other greens. This is from the cypress behind me, in fact. Isn't that pretty? What a nice foliage. And we can add that even a little bit further down in the arrangement. And I'll put another piece over here on the opposite side. Now we'll use some of the Dusty Miller with its bright gray foliage. And the stems are sturdy enough that they'll go right into that oasis. And of course, the moisture in the oasis really helps a lot. Now, here's a little bit of rosemary for a great fragrance. We'll add that. And look here, some of the winter flowering heather. Here's something that just adds a bit of bright color to any arrangement. And again, it's from the garden. All these things are taken from the garden. And I know when you get out in your garden, you're going to find a lot of other plants that are very attractive too. Here's a dwarf variety of rhododendron, for example. And I'll just put a couple branches of that right in the end. And is what basically I've done. I'm accomplishing more than one thing here. These branches have been out of proportion to the rest of the plant. So I'm actually doing a winter pruning, which really helps too. Here's a little bit of berries off of a Darwin, or a barberry. Darwini is the variety. Look how pretty they are. And here's a little bit of greens off of one of the fir trees that has blown off in the windstorm. So we'll just add them too. And here's a small piece of camellia branch. And it was growing out of proportion as well. And in the middle here, let me just pull this away so you can kind of see what we're accomplishing here. Then right in the middle is what we do is put a candle, or you could use a Christmas ornament or a Madonna or something of that nature. Just use your imagination. But all of these greens are directly from the garden. And why not take advantage of them, whether you're using variegated foliages or the gray foliages or the green foliages. What a nice combination they make for the holiday season. Have you ever thought of using a living tree for holiday decorating purposes? This is a beautiful Siberian spruce. And you know, the beauty of the living tree is that they're worth as much the day after Christmas as the day you bought them. And of course, these beautiful trees can also be used for years and years. So in addition to value, a second point is that they're less of a fire hazard in the home. And a third point is that you can use them outdoors as a living tree as a source of cut greens in future years. So the living tree has many, many advantages. And the greatest thing, I think, is that they're comparable with the prices of cut trees too. Now, this is a gorgeous incense cedar, and so you get the great fragrance indoors. Pines also offer great fragrance, and we don't have any in this particular planting, but nevertheless they're a great tree. Back behind me is a grand fir, and then this large one here is a beautiful alpine hemlock. Now, I'm a little bit hesitant to recommend soft needled trees to you. And remember, all of these living trees should only be kept in the home for about 7 to 10 days, and then they should go back outside once again. And it's very important that when you take them indoors, that you put down a saucer first so that there's no chance of ruining the carpeting or linoleum in your home. And if you're concerned about it tending to weight down your carpeting, for example, if you'll put maybe about 3 or 4 marbles under the saucer, that'll hold it up, and there'll be an airspace in between. And that works out, I think, a lot better for most people. But the waterproof saucers are really important. Check the watering, by the way, on these trees daily. That's really important. Don't let them dry out while they're in the home. Now, here's the little Alberta spruce. And for anyone that lives in an apartment, this is an ideal tree. Actually, it's an ideal tree for anybody because it's so slow growing. It'll act as a living Christmas tree for many, many years. And basically all you'll need to do is to occasionally repot it into a larger pot as it grows in size. So, you know, it'll be a great value for you. Here's another nice tree. This is probably the most popular of all living and cut trees. This is the noble fir. And noble fir, usually as it develops, gets kind of a whitish tinge, not whitish, but silvery tips on them. It's really a pretty tree. The living trees are great trees for use in the home. Now, one other thing that I want you to keep in mind, that is, if it's really cold the day after Christmas, and you're taking it out of the house, don't put it out in the outside. Put it into a garage or maybe the utility room until the weather moderates once again, and then set it right outdoors. A living Christmas tree, a great value for you and beauty for years to come. We're in Menlo Park, California, and we're at the Sunset Magazine complex, and I'm with Kathy Brenzel, the senior garden editor of Sunset Magazine. What are the facilities here, Kathy?
Well, Ed, we've got all kinds of facilities. This is really the headquarters of Sunset Magazine and Books, and this is where we have our central offices, but we also have extensive grounds, 7 acres or so. Our test kitchens are here, the test garden where we develop things for the magazine. It's all right here.
And are they open to the public?
Yes, the public can come in and see the gardens. 7 acres, you can have a self-guided tour. We have a map, walk around the gardens, and there are occasional tours. You can walk by the test gardens. Lots to see.
Tell us a little bit about the gardens.
The gardens are interesting because they were designed along the edge of a creek. That's the San Francisco Creek, and they're designed to mimic the Pacific coast from the northwest all the way down to the desert. And we have plants that grow in each of those zones along this border so that you can literally walk the Pacific coast from the north to the south.
That's neat, isn't it? And I noticed down at the end it kind of comes back around, so it brings you into the true southwest, doesn't it?
It does. It goes complete with cactus and everything that grows down there.
Oh, that is neat. Tell us a little bit also about, I noticed just out beyond us here is a vegetable garden. You do a lot of things here that you actually use in the magazines, don't you?
Absolutely. A lot of our stories, probably 60% of them, originate here at our test garden. And if we're going to write about vegetables or flowers or whatever, we want to have first-hand experience in the garden experience with it, so we can write, tell our readers what it's like to grow this, what they can expect, and write from experience.
Sure. And we're here in the fall, and for example, the container in front of us and the one behind us are some that you've used in the publications, I believe.
That's right. We did things on combining perennials in containers, and so we actually designed some and planted them here. And we have things growing there all year long.
And what area are we in right here?
This is a patio off our entertainment patio, and this is of course where we do have a lot of container plantings, and this handles a lot of spillover crowds when we have rather large entertainment facilities here for use by the company for various functions. And this is a spillover area, barbecue, all kinds of things.
Yes, and I think it's important that we share with our viewers too, is that you're in the publishing business.
Yes, we do books and magazines and special interest publications for gardening and food and all kinds of endeavors.
Thanks, Kathy. That's all the time we have today. Hope you can join me at this same time next time for Gardening in America. And remember, our relationship with the planet today is tomorrow's future. Have a great week.